I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas. It's New Year's is actually right around the corner now, so it goes one weekend right to the next. So first you're with family partying, and now you're just out partying. I mean, what can we say? And today on the conversation, we are with Matthew Bennett Young, who is a writer and also a illustrator, and I think he does, from what I understand, a lot more in illustration books, so we will definitely be talking about that. And welcome to the show, Matthew.
Thank you, Greg. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your illustration books and how you got started in them.
Um, yeah, it's I call them picture books, Greg. Uh, and the reason for that is that a lot of people who refer to this kind of format, they automatically call them children's books. And I although I do write in a sort of simple style, often I try and do that as often as possible because I'm interested in appealing to both children and adults. So I might be shooting myself in the foot there, but I I just love picture books. I love art and I love literature, and I've never wanted to do well. I There are reasons, practical reasons, why I think you should try any kind of writing, but this is the direction for me. It's what I enjoy the most, put it that way. And sometimes I illustrate, and other times I work with illustrators. I'm working with one now on for my next book, for example. But so it all depends. I like to try myself. I've had no formal training, so you can be the judge of the product in the end. But there's also a means to an end with that as well, which we can go into. With trying to encourage, I suppose, children to feel a bit freer, not and enjoy the art that they're doing. And I think, of course, if anyone does, children do. I just don't think they should be so concerned about it being entirely representative. And you do, as children get a bit older, they get very critical of themselves and what their efforts achieve. If it's not exactly like what they're trying to draw, then they're disappointed. And so certainly both the books I've illustrated, you could easily see, you could easily be critical of. And there's a sense of play there, a sense of rawness, but there's a reason for it too.
Well, how long have you been doing this, and what got you started into doing it?
Yeah, I have always written on and off. I've always written. I'm not completely committed. I'm really aware that a lot of authors seem to be extremely well read and are, I don't know how they seem to spend a lot of time reading but I don't. I did a lot of reading when I was younger, and maybe that was formative for me. I'm sure it was. I found a lot of it's funny. I was listening to Delia Smith on the radio the other day. She talked about the difference between, or your version of happiness, and I liked hers. Her version was finding a sense of inner peace. And I kind of, that meant a lot to me because I think that's what. So there we're talking a bit more about contentment rather than, this typical kind of happiness that is more elusive. which is, I think, sort of convoluted with all sorts of other things. But I found a lot of peace in reading. Certainly when I was younger, I used to read for days, really, without being aware of anything else. So, but yeah, that and listening to stories really got me. I think stories at school, read by teachers, my headmaster at my primary school, got me interested. And over the years, I started to just try and have a go at writing my own and making picture books and poetry and short stories. And so I've done it all. But when I had my first son, I realized when I was reading to him that he would choose books that he knew I was interested in. Typical sort of, the unselfish approach of, I mean, it's kind of astounding, really, because children are sort of determined to be egocentric by default. But, yet my 5-6-year-old would always choose picture books that he knew I was either animated by or enjoyed. And that got me interested in trying to create something where we could talk about our experience together. And that was really the start of me producing picture books. And they're still all about that, basically. Perspective taking and discussion of experience that between adults and children is what I'm looking for.
Was there, you talked about the past and reading constantly, was there any book or story that inspired you to get started? Or
well, I think, what's interesting, I like that question, Greg. I think I can think of an artist, certainly several, but not one specific book. But then, so one, you would definitely call him a children's author because he was really famous in that era, is a guy called David McKee. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he produced he's produced a number of fantastic, I think, picture books. It's the ultimate for me. They can be slightly they often comments on social issues as well. He did a book which was really, I mean, you can't really call it a children's book because the only thing that makes it a children's book is the illustration or the style of the illustration even. But this book is called Not Now, Bernard, and within 3 or 4 pages, the child in the story gets eaten by a monster. That's not something you're going to read to your kids at bedtime. But what the book is about parenting style. Parents who ignore their kid. So they're not even aware that the monster has eaten their kid. The monster comes in the house, goes up the stairs. They serve him Bernard's dinner, and that's it. The book ends. And I find it just absolutely brilliant. But is that a children's? And there are so many books that are picture books that are they or aren't they children's books? Is this debate that's never gonna end about at what point do you discuss serious issues with children? And I find that very interesting. But he wrote a lot of other more typical and traditional children's books as well. And he wrote a series called Mr. Ben, which was televised in the UK certainly when I was young in the 1980s. So I think I was fascinated by that kind of approach if we put it that way. But there are a lot of brilliant artists, I think.
Yeah, that was interesting that you said that about teaching children on hard subjects, because my grandson was actually over here yesterday, and we had to go a little bit about with death and with him. So, I mean, that was a very hard subject because he's only 4 years old. So the comprehension, and a lot of times children books can actually help with that comprehension because they see, I think children have a lot more visual, which is, I mean, it's hard to explain, but a lot more visual. And that helps them understand.
Yeah, of course. But I think they are, yeah. So what you're touching on is how significant it is. It's perfect for me because I definitely want to comment on this. It's not about what you're talking about necessarily. It's how you communicate, and that's everything, I think. So it's not to say that perhaps nothing's taboo, but I think there's certainly a lot that isn't, or that is, that is treated as such, but shouldn't be. Yeah, and apart from anything else, children grow up in, what, a million billion different environments, with, and are different themselves. So, their experience, their perceptions, their everything is, it can't be, there can't be a hard and fast rule for, I don't think so anyway. One thing I think helps is if the child brings it up themselves, then you are, then it's definitely important that you respond.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, where can people find some of your work at, or your published books?
Yeah, they're all on Amazon, or and digitally. It's all online. So Amazon, I suppose, is the biggest site or online platform. But they're as an author, self-published author, you can there's a lot you can do these days if anybody's interested that is learning about this. Certainly digitally, it seems that format is getting more and more popular all the time. And Amazon have Kindle books, and you can upload once with a company called Draft to Digital, D2D. I don't know if you've heard of them, Greg.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So rather than spending hours and I don't know, weeks almost uploading on every individual online platform, you go to a main player like D2D, and they'll do it all for you for a very reasonable percent of what you sell. I think it's 10%. And certainly when time is really, well, the only commodity really ultimately, that's worth considering. I think.
Oh, for sure.
But to answer your question, yeah, you can buy them online. If they Google my full name in your screen here, they'll come to my site on Amazon. And so I have 3 books up there at the moment. The first one I was referring to is called Maybe Colors, and that was the one I wrote for my son. It's actually dedicated to him, my first son. And that is all about perspective taking. So it's about talking about your experience of color. And I was really nervous because I just did it as an experiment. I knew how I wanted to write it. So it's kind of poetic. It's like a series of small poems about each color. And he was the first person to read it, actually, with his friend. And it worked, honestly worked like a dream. I couldn't have wished for a better beginning for that because immediately they hadn't even finished the book, they started talking about their experience of red, and et cetera, et cetera. So so that's great, and that is really useful from that. It's very simple, but the illustrations are a little bit abstract. So I was combining this style with the simple form of poetic form of the text. And I like to work with a lot of space. I like to have, certainly in 2 of those 3 books, I like to try and give the reader a sense of space and time so that they can have that moment to reflect on what this means, this experience. So trying to do that even with the layout of the text and the fonts and the style of the illustration as well. So it all hopefully combines to achieve that effect.
Oh, for sure. So everyone, go to Amazon, check out his books. There, you're going to have a little bit of poetry, picture books, illustration. So it will be a learning experience for children also, which is also a good thing, especially if you have young ones or grandkids like I do.
They're all sorry, Greg, they're all quite different. I don't know if it's okay to interrupt you.
Oh, yes, definitely.
But what unifies them is this notion or this concept of trying to elicit a discussion of experience. So maybe Colors does that in this simple poetic form, and that you're using as a in a commercial sense. I'm using color. I mean, what more basic tool can you use, especially with kids? They all have some experience of that you can't get away from that, because as soon as you open your eyes, I think the book even says that at the end, refers to that. But the second one, again, very simple format, Snowman. It's much more of a kind of traditional. It is a story in a sense, but again, it's a little abstract. I like telling you this though, because I did the illustration for that, and it's a romance, really. But it starts off in a kind of peculiar way, talking about dreams. So the characters in the story all have their dreams, but the illustrations they all relate their dreams from the night before. And while they're dreaming and sleeping, I'm trying to create this sense of snow falling. So when they wake up in the morning, as you sometimes do, your landscape has changed entirely, and I find that those moments magical. I recall them very well from being young, being a child, just how the snow had transformed, my environment completely, and in a very positive way. And but then the book just it moves through how they decide to build a snowman, but then the snowman starts talking and basically says that he's going to melt if they don't make a snow woman to go that's what's going to happen. And I won't tell you the ending of the story, but what's nice about what I like about the illustration is that the images are geometric structures of snowflakes, and you might find it hard to believe how you can do that, but have a check out the book. Amazon's great, by the way, because I don't know if people are aware. You can click on the inside this, and then you can get a sense of what the book and the illustration is like.
You can get a small preview.
Yeah, and actually, it's not even small, Greg, because as the author, you can choose to show almost, I think it's up to 40% of the book's content. So it's quite a lot. So you get a very good idea, depending on what the author thinks about that. either they don't choose it at all. It could be it could be up to a maximum of 40%. But these images are taken from the original photographic plates of the first person to photograph snowflakes. And his name is Wilson Bentley. And there's a museum not so far away from me in Vermont. And I've been there to visit, actually. I became fascinated in his story, his real life story, because all he ever wanted to do his whole life was take photographs of snowflakes. And he managed to do it. In the end, he was living, just to give you some context, at the very beginning, the emergence of photography as a technology. So he had to invent his own, very often his own ways of being able to photograph the geometric structure of snowflakes. They're absolutely stunning, these photos. So I wanted to use that just as a kind of authentic tribute to him, really, as well. But it's sort of weird. It can be kind of weird. It's not typical illustration, in a sense of a children's book. So that's what I mean. It's just a different approach, and very, very. Perhaps that you enjoy it. Perhaps you find that too different from what you're used to. I don't know, but it's certainly the way that I like every book to be unique in that sense. So.
Well, you definitely want the books to be unique. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Something that could really draw something in.
Well, that's what. Yeah, of course, that's what every book needs to do. I hope that mine do that. I mean, I think, if you listen closely to what I've said so far about the first two, with maybe colors, the format it's repetitive, but that's okay, because it has a very simple function, and you do get some personality with each color and each experience. So, and there's only 10 colors, so it's a simple book. But the Snowman is much more of a story where you go through this process of being introduced to characters, and then the idea of the snowman, and then the surprise. I think is very important, where people realize, oh wow, this involves a snow woman as well. We don't refer to snow women. So there's a bit of a comment on how our language reflects our understanding of a working understanding of gender as well. And so there's a lot. I mean, I think I was reading about Damien Hirst, it's the UK artist, and he said something like, true art is you won't forget it. It's something like there's a lot of boring art, and there's a lot of conceptual art and representative art. Doesn't matter what art it is. It's if it gives you a memory and sticks in your memory, then something has been done properly with that work. Was his, I think, intention saying that, and I hope that's the case with my books. I'm certainly trying to be aware of that.
Oh, for sure. And again, people, you can catch him on Amazon. Just type in his full name, Matthew Bennett Young. You can actually Google it too. And our next show will be at noon today. And then we have one more on Thursday for the Con-Versation. And then we have one more for the Con Hour until the new year. And like I said before, there are going to be changes with the Con Hour. So be prepared. And until the next show, everyone, adios.